We've been, I think, waiting for this sort of moment for a little while. I think ever since Tim Steidten left, we knew he was going to come out and say some stuff about his time at West Ham eventually. We just didn't know how long that would be, how early, and to the extent to which he would talk about it. Well, he had an interview. He did an interview with The Athletic yesterday. I recorded this. And I've seen all the different bits that people are talking about online. I just wanted to sort of talk about what I think about what he said. Because I think it's interesting. I think it really is interesting. So he makes a few sort of main points, and that's what we're going to go through by point. And the first point that he makes is so his exact quote. I'm going to quote him now. When I arrived, Moyes was there, but if the structure is not clear, the power relations, the competences, you have a problem. Then the coach's questions was partly justified. Why should he let himself be criticised by me when ultimately the owner decides whether I leave or stay? So what he's sort of saying there is like, well, you know, Moyes had every right to sort of be like, well, why should I listen to him? He's sort of saying, yeah, I can sort of understand why Moyes was maybe annoyed, and he's sort of blaming the board for maybe the lack of collaboration between the two, maybe the lack of a good dynamics. Or he's sort of saying, you're the reason that we didn't get on. Like, it's not Moyes' fault, it's not my fault. You know, the way that we both approached it, the way that we both had the mentality towards it, didn't really work with what the board had sort of set up. And I mean, that's probably partly true, right? I think there were probably elements from both of them that they thought if they got a new manager in, the relationship would be better, or if they did got rid of the other, essentially, the relationship would be better. I'm sure Steidten probably thought, well, at the moment he's got more credit than I have, but if we're going to get a new manager, they're not going to have more credit than I have. I'm going to have more credit, so therefore I will be listened to over the board, I'll have more power, and Phil Moyes sort of thought, well, if I can get rid of him, then I'll get more power on transfers back. So I expect that, yeah, there was probably an element of kill or be killed, sort of that sort of mentality between the two of them, right? And I know a lot of people blame Steidten for Moyes getting sacked. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think that's fair. I think what he's saying here is essentially that neither side power, right? The power was ultimately with David Sullivan. I think that's sort of what he's saying here, is that the power was ultimately with the board. I didn't get Moyes sacked. Like, I couldn't have done anything to help that situation. And I think that's probably fair. I don't think Steidten got some Moyes sacked. I think that Moyes got sacked because he didn't want to join this sort of model. The way I sort of see Moyes getting sacked, the way I see what sort of happened with all this, right, is that when Moyes joined, we were in like the early 2000s, right, 90s. Like, we were a very outdated football club, right, and Moyes sort of brought us to probably about 2010 to 2014, when he sort of left Everton, sort of around when he sort of left Everton. That's sort of the age that he brought us up to by getting in scouts and just having a bit more of like a recruitment team. You know, I think he started doing like the football manager thing he used to do at Everton, where he had like looks for, they would get the scouts to look through like the football manager database, sort of look for sort of players who had certain attributes, right? Because, and obviously you're not going to base a signing off this, but there's tens of thousands of players in that database, right? Your scouts can't go and look at every single right back in the world, but they can go on there and they can go, well, hold on, this right back's supposedly really good defensively. Then they can go and have a look, and then if he is, well, then they can go, okay, well, let's get him then. If they want someone defensive, or if they want someone who's really good at crossing, they can go on, you know, and they can find someone who's really good at crossing, and then go and watch him, and then if he is really good at crossing, then they can get him in. That's the sort of thing they used to do, apparently. And that's sort of where he brought us to, right? So when you're in 2019 and you've brought yourself up to 2014, 2015, that's good, right? Because you're new, you're with the time. You're not necessarily 100% with the times, but you're close enough, right? If you go out and buy it in a car, and you go out and you get a car that's 5 years old, right, or 4 years old, that's good, right? You've done good. You've got a nice, fairly new car. It's going to be reliable, you know. It's people in the night, it's a nice car actually. That's new. The problem is when we get to 2023, 2024, and we're still in 2014, still in 2015. If anything, we've probably gone back a little bit, maybe gone back a year or two, sort of maybe 2013, 2014 sort of era, right? And suddenly you're like 10 years out of date, and you're like, that's getting a little bit old, you know. If you've got that car, and you've still got that car, sort of, and it's now sort of 10 years old, you're maybe sort of thinking, it's getting a little bit old now, I kind of want a new car. and he's justified in that, right? And I think that's why we decided to bring Steidten in, and I think that's ultimately why we got rid of Moyes, because he didn't want to be part of that style. His mentality is still, let's do it how we've always done it, which, when you get into 2025, you're still sort of managing a team like you did in 2010. There's a reason that it's not necessarily working, because it wasn't. So I think he's sort of fair to make that point. And that sort of leads into his sort of transfer sort of talk, and this is a really important comment. He says, I believe it takes 8 to 10 transfer windows to change a squad. I told the owner that clearly, that has been the long-term project. At least that was what I gave to the club. My task was to build something in the long term, which also needs young players. I think this is the bit that's caused the most debate, the most outrage. 10 transfer windows. That was what the project was. To change your squad. Now, the first thing that I saw people saying was just laughing, or people saying that was ridiculous, or he was crazy. I think he's right. Right, that's 5 years, and I think it does take 5 years to change a squad. Right, I think certainly our squad's in a really bad state, right, and I think what he's saying is like to get that squad in the position that we want it, right, which is like consistently in a position to compete in the top half of the league, sort of for those European places. That's going to take 10 years. He's not saying we can't expect anything for 10 transfer windows. That's not what he's saying. But I think what he's saying is to get it to a state where it's going to be consistent, right? And it's going to be in a good state, and it's going to be in a consistent state. That's going to take 10 years. And that I believe, right? Or 5 years, sorry, for 10 transfer windows. For 4 to 5 years. That I believe, right? Because to get to the point where we had the quality in our squad, that took 4 to 5 years, right? When Moyes came in 2019, there was not really any quality in that squad. To get to the point where we suddenly had quality with players like Bowen, with players like Paqueta, with players like Emerson, maybe a little bit Emerson, Alvarez. That took 4 to 5 years, right? So yeah, he's right. Not every transfer is going to be perfect. Sometimes you can't help it. You're going to make a transfer and it's not going to go right, and it's not going to be something anyone would have foresaw, and it's not going to be that it's necessarily your fault. It's just not going to work out, right? And like he says, we needed young players, right? But he's also saying it's long term, right? So he's not saying, right, I'm going to go out and get 10 young players, right? He's also saying we need some young players, but it's a long-term project. We're not going to get them all in at once, right? And he sort of alludes to this later on. I think he brought in some other players like Fulkrug and like William Rodriguez, because he knew that we needed some reliable players for now, right? I think the problem, and I think this is sort of what he's saying when he says it's going to take 4 to 5 years, or 8 to 10 transfer windows, is that you can go in and get a load of kids in. They're not going to be very good necessarily, and they're not going to be necessarily ready. And we didn't have a squad who were in a good, reliable position. I think that's what he's sort of trying to say, is that we were caught. He sort of alludes to the layout that they're caught in a real sort of middle ground, like where nothing's really going to work. It's going to be really difficult to get it right, like 100% right straight away in one transfer window. And I think that's what he's sort of saying, is like we're going to need 10 transfer windows for this to work, right? For this to be final, to get it to that point, because of the fact that the squad is in such a state. And also I think it's Hammerstad. I love Hammerstad. Like, watch a lot of their stuff. They're really good. But I think I saw one of them say the project doesn't exist. I disagree with that. I think projects do exist. I just think that it's very, very rare that projects come to fruition, right? Because I think it's very, very often that either the club decides that it's just not working. Football's a results-based business, right? And to get to that, for the project to come to fruition, you have to consistently get the decisions right, and you have to consistently you have to be a bit patient, right? But you just can't be too patient in football. So like when Chelsea, they got in Pochettino for a project, they sacked him after a season, right? Because they decided, they didn't have the patience, right? And that was Potter. More Pochettino. I think actually that was them sacking him to keep the project going, because what they wanted to do didn't align with what Pochettino sort of thought would be best, and they had disagreements. So I think the project does exist, and I think for Tim Steidten to have consistently talked to some players much higher, with much better options on West Ham to come to West Ham. There obviously was some kind of a project, right? I think the project does exist. I don't always think. I think it's just it's not something that's always going to be reached, right? It's like Stalin. He made his 5-year plans. A lot of time they didn't come to fruition. A lot of them didn't, but he would say they did, right? He would say they did, which is why they theoretically did, right? But a lot of the time he wouldn't necessarily reach goals that he set, right? Because they were ambitious goals, right? That doesn't mean that the 5-year plans didn't exist. They did exist. They just didn't always work. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the whole project thing. But that's what we go into the next bit. I have a lot of weaknesses, and I think they made a lot of mistakes, which I think he did make mistakes. I don't think he's just alluding to players. I think he's alluding to maybe his conduct, maybe the way that he sort of came across, and I think that's pretty nice of him to say, pretty noble thing to do. I think you've got certain people who will sit and go, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, what could I do? Like Millie said, I think everyone's got in the attitude of, look, I did everything I could, I would sort of screw over, sort of, not really, that's not what he said, but when he's been on, like, Sam Allardyce's podcast, or talking about being at West Ham at the Euros or whatever, he sort of alluded to the fact that he was sort of stitched up, which I don't think is entirely fair. He almost makes out like he sort of did everything right, which I don't think is true. I think the second half of the season was dismal, and he made a lot of mistakes. I think he made a lot of mistakes all throughout his management, but I think everyone does, and he doesn't really seem to accept that. So take that with you, but I think Steidten's, to be fair, quite fair in saying he made mistakes. I think he knew that he made mistakes, and I think he seems like quite reasonable in this interview. That's all I'm saying. He said he would have chosen the same players over and over again. I'm firmly convinced that Guilherme will be an incredible player, incredibly great player, he says. Bringing in the players, perhaps the wrong time in retrospect, but not the wrong player. Now, I think he's spot on in what he says. He says that he would have. So he said I made a lot of mistakes, and then he sort of says that he would have chosen the same players again now. So he's obviously alluding to that he made some mistakes with players, but I think it's fair for him to say that he would have chosen the same players. I think on paper, when he signed them, everyone was happy that we were signing those players, right? The only player that I can sort of say that people were maybe a little bit like, should we have signed him, was Nicholas Fulcock, right? He was the only real player that people sort of looked at like, we shouldn't have signed him. In the starting time, right? So on paper, everybody agreed with him. Everyone was of the same opinion, right? As much as they like to go, I always said that this wouldn't work. You didn't. Right? I was on the opposite side. I don't want Nicholas Fulcock. I think it's a terrible signing. However, I actually think he was right. I think he sort of says, I think he sort of saying in the interview, where he says I don't think about injuries, which I think that's not a great sentence, and I wasn't. That worried me a little bit. That was one of the things where I was like, that's not really something I want my technical director to be saying, right? Because you do have to consider injuries. But I sort of did also get his point that what he's doing is he's looking at the player, because injuries are unpredictable. You can go and get a player who never gets injured, who gets injured all the time. Well, like Somerville, I don't know if Somerville never gets injured, but he's not certainly had as many injury jobs as he had since he got here. And he still gets really injured, whereas you can go and get players who are really injury prone and they can come and they might not get injured. So yeah, I sort of get what he means, and I sort of understand his point of view, even if I don't necessarily 100% agree with it. And then there's a bit about Guilherme. I do agree with that. I think he didn't have to double down and say, I really think Guilherme is going to be a great player, right? But I think that he probably does think that, right? I think David Sullivan sort of said it was a panic buy. Yeah, I disagree. I think when all that stuff came out, right, there was from David Sullivan, right? We all know it's from David Sullivan, right? X is like, I got it from all sorts. It's mostly from David Sullivan. You know it is, right? Because of the way it says talks, and because we know that most of what X gets nowadays is from David Sullivan, right? Ironically enough, he I found a lot of what David Sullivan said to not make any sense. Number one, he said Tim Steidten wasn't involved in getting Edson Alvarez and Mohamed Kudus. So what he's saying is essentially we had the deals for Edson Alvarez and Mohamed Kudus done in June. We had it all agreed. We had the agreements with them, but we just decided not to finalise the deals until August, like a week after the season started, which obviously is complete bollocks, right? Because you wouldn't do that, right? So Steidten did have a role to play in those signs. He might have identified them, but that's not what he said. He said that was nothing to do with him, but it was because he started work in June and we didn't sign him until August. Right? He convinced them to come. Right? Alvarez literally said that in an interview. Alvarez isn't going to be saying that to push Tim Steidten's agenda. He's going to say because it was true, right? And yeah, same with Kudus. He had offers from all sorts of places. And Tim Steidten came and said, well, why don't we come to West Ham? We're building something here. And he was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. That's what happened, right? He was saying things like it was maybe a bit rude. Well, again, that's something like you're going to sort of expect when you hire someone from like Europe. Like you get that with a lot of European managers. They're not necessarily rude. They come across differently to English people, right? They said that about Ten Hag, is that sometimes they would come across maybe a little bit really offish and really quite like maybe not particularly nice. But he wasn't being rude. It's just not how they act in like Germany or the Netherlands. That's just not really. Yeah, they have a different sort of way of conducting themselves, and I think that was probably mostly what it was. Again, you sort of have to think about those things when you hire someone. He was saying that they were always fighting, or he was always trying to put that narrative out, that he fought with everyone and they didn't get along. And he was sort of going, Tim Steidten wanted Lopetegui. Sort of essentially trying to say he hired him because Tim Steidten wanted him, which we know isn't true. Right, we know isn't true. We know that Sullivan hired him, right? And Steidten might have given his final sign-off, but again, there's only so much. If he keeps going, well, I disagree with that, then he's going to get sacked, right? And he doesn't want to get sacked. As much as he wants to do the best job he can, he also doesn't want to get sacked. And sometimes you have to be a bit of a yes man, right? You have to play the long game, don't you? So I think a lot of what David Sullivan said was stupid or completely misconstrued and made out to be something it wasn't. I think that's only why we will sell Guilherme. I think we will. I don't think we'll sell him because we think he was a bad player. I think we'll sell him to prove a point. I think David Sullivan has made up his mind that he doesn't like Tim Steidten, and I think he's wanted to come back in charge, and I think he will now prove a point by selling Guilherme, by saying, well, he's not good enough. But regardless, he could come off the pitch and score a hat-trick next week, right? He will still get sold because it'll be, he's not good enough. He's made up his mind. That's going to happen regardless, right? I wouldn't be surprised if we sell him a loss, right? If he just accepts the first offer that comes in, just to prove a point, right? Because he just wants his power back. He's not selling him because it's a smart thing to do, because it's a footballly sound idea. In fact, I generally starting to think that the only reason Paul isn't playing Guilherme is because he's been told not to, because we're going to sell him, because I generally can't see how that Chelsea performance hasn't been rewarded with another sub. He should be subbed on. I genuinely believe he's possibly told, well, David Sullivan, don't play him because we want to sell him. Right, I just can't understand. Otherwise why? And he keeps saying we would accept offers, and we've got offers coming in. But again, I question why. You've got clubs like Atletico Madrid coming in. Atletico Madrid, right? They're a good team. They've got some really good young players coming through, right? If they want him, there's probably a good reason for that, right? And that's because he's probably a very good player. It's just all a bit weird at the end of the day, and I don't like the narrative that's being sort of peddled. I really don't. I think everything he says in this interview that I've seen has been pretty sound. I think I agree with most of it, to be honest with you, right? And I see a lot of people scoffing at what he said or disagreeing or having a go with him, but I think a lot of people sort of made their minds up about him. They've made their minds up about David Moyes and what they want to believe, and that's just something that happens, isn't it, with everything. We all get stubborn about certain things. Well, I get stubborn about things that I really like or really believe. That's just going to happen. It's just nature. It's just how we think. It's how we act. But I think in this situation, I think he's probably not as in the wrong as he says as people are making him out to be. I think there's a lot of sensible stuff in here, actually. I don't think he should have been sacked. I think people have deluded themselves into believing that McCauley's going to be this guy, this technical director. He's not. He's just a glorified scout, right, at the end of the day. He's not going to be going out and interview, we've now got David Sullivan to convince people to come to West Ham again, right? Not only does that look weird, it looks unprofessional, it looks outdated. He's not particularly, a lot of people don't like him, right? And you see a lot of stuff about, this person didn't want to come to West Ham. Like Amorim, he supposedly didn't really come across particularly well to Amorim, right when Amorim flew over. Simon Jordan talks about doesn't like him, does he? Because he used to have to deal with him through the Premier League and stuff. He doesn't come across him as someone a lot of people like. Sam Allardyce doesn't seem to be particularly keen on any of the West Ham board. I just think that sacking him was a mistake, but that's not what this video is about. It's about the interview, and ultimately I think you've got to look past what you personally believe and what you want to believe. You've got to look at it from an objective point of view. He says some sound stuff in it, right? He says really logical stuff. There's some stuff I don't necessarily 100% agree with, but I think for the most part, he's got a really good point. And I think you've got to take off your rose-tinted glasses and you've got to look at that. But yeah, I think that's all we've got to talk about. Obviously, one or two of these signings didn't 100% work out. Kudus hasn't quite been as good as we thought. Alvarez hasn't had his best moments, but last season they were looking like a transfer, so I think we do have to calm down a little bit with the criticism we give to Steidten. Well. We've been, I think, waiting for